Upon initial observation, Daisy Coleman seemed to embody the quintessential image of grace and potential. Her kind demeanor, sharp intellect, and an array of talents made her a picture of youthful vibrancy. Yet, beneath the surface of her alluring exterior, Daisy harbored a deeply troubled spirit. From a tender age, she faced harrowing experiences that belied her outward appearance. Daisy Coleman entered the world on March 30th, 1997, in the quaint town of Albany, Missouri. Her family consisted of her father, Michael, a practicing physician, and her mother, Melinda, a veterinarian. Daisy was the second of 4 children in the Coleman household, surrounded by 3 younger brothers. The year 2009 marked a pivotal and tragic moment in their lives. Daisy, her father Michael, and one of her brothers were en route to a nearby town for a wrestling tournament when their journey took a fateful turn. Their car struck an unforeseen obstruction, leading to a devastating crash into a ravine. This accident claimed the life of the family's patriarch. In the wake of this tragedy, the Colemans relocated to Maryville, Missouri, a larger city offering new beginnings. Melinda found herself at the helm of the family, grappling with the immense responsibility of single-handedly raising her 3 sons and daughter. This period was rife with challenges, a prelude to further trials that the family would encounter. In the chilly pre-dawn hours of January 8, 2012, Daisy Coleman, a 14-year-old, found herself awakening in the snow-laden yard of her home, the temperature plunging to 0 degrees or lower. Daisy lay there, her hair frozen to the ground, clad only in a t-shirt and athletic pants. The first thought that struck her in that bewildering state was a haunting one. I must be dead. Immobilized, unable to raise her voice or articulate her thoughts, she was engulfed in tears. With immense effort, Daisy managed to drag herself to her house's front door, pounding on it with every ounce of her remaining strength. It was now 5 a.m. By some stroke of fortune, her mother Melinda, deep in slumber in her room, discerned the odd noise. Initially mistaking it for their dogs seeking shelter from the cold, Melinda donned her robe and made her way to the door, intending to let the pets in. The sight that met her upon opening the door was nothing short of a shock. Her daughter Daisy was lying on the threshold. Daisy lay on the frosty steps, her consciousness waning, with the sharp scent of alcohol enveloping her. She was unable to articulate her plight, expressing her distress only through tears. In a panic, her mother Melinda called out for assistance, summoning her sons. They sprang into action, hurrying downstairs to retrieve the hypothermic Daisy from the cold and bringing her into the warmth of their home. The family's fear was palpable. Initially, they tried to warm Daisy with blankets. Upon closer inspection, however, Melinda noticed severe signs of frostbite on her daughter's legs. She quickly filled the bathtub with water, instructing her sons to carry Daisy to the bathroom and then leave her under her care. Daisy was still unresponsive as Melinda started to undress her, revealing extensive bruising and red marks on her legs. It was at this moment that the grim reality dawned upon Melinda. Her beloved Daisy had endured something horrific. She gently placed Daisy in the cool water, applying her veterinary knowledge to administer appropriate first aid for the frostbite, gradually raising the water temperature to warm her daughter's body. Thankfully, her efforts were successful, and Daisy began to regain warmth. But her speech remained confused and disjointed. Alarmed by her daughter's condition, Melinda dialed 911, prompting the arrival of the police. The officers arrived and examined Daisy. Daisy's mind was still clouded by alcohol, and she was unable to testify about the events of the previous night. So the officers had to listen to the story of Daisy's friend Paige, who was at the Coleman family home that night and slept in the room with Daisy. Here's what the friend said. On Saturday, January 7th, 2012, Daisy invited her best friend Paige to her house for a party. In the evening, the girls watched horror movies and drank hot drinks, which were secretly stolen from the home wine cabinet of the family Coleman. Toward nightfall, Daisy began texting with her older brother's friend, a 17-year-old boy named Matthew Barnett, who was a popular player on the high school soccer team. Matthew, upon learning that Daisy was having a sleepover with her friend, sent the girls a text message that read, "Hey, do you want to have some fun at my place?" Daisy and Paige were excited about the offer and agreed to meet Matthew and his friends without a second thought. Around 1 a.m., already on January 8th, the friends snuck out of Daisy's house through her bedroom window and ran around the corner of the house, where Matthew and 4 of his buddies met them. The guys took the girls to Matthew's house helped them get into the basement through a window, and asked them to be quiet so as not to wake Barnett's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. Paige revealed that as soon as she and Daisy got into the basement, Matthew immediately started buying Daisy drinks. Her friends sat and watched Daisy, who drank one drink after another almost continuously. At one point, one of the guys, Nicholas, came over to Paige, took the girl by the hand, and led her to the next empty room in the basement. There, the couple had an intimacy initiated by the young man. At this time, Matthew and Daisy secluded themselves in another room, inside of which was a large bed. When the door opened several times, Paige managed to see what was happening in that room with Daisy. The girl was lying on the bed almost unconscious. She couldn't speak or move. Matthew took advantage of her helplessness and made close contact with Daisy. His friend, Jordan Z, filmed everything that was happening on his smartphone camera. At 2 a.m., the boys decided it was time for everyone to head home. They drove Paige and Daisy back to the Coleman residence. Upon arrival, Paige was the first to exit the vehicle. Matthew advised her that Daisy needed to stay outside for a while to sober up in the cold air. The boys assured Paige they would stay with Daisy to ensure her safety on the street, urging Paige to return home and rest. Trusting their words, Paige agreed and left Daisy with them. She entered Daisy's bedroom through the window, quickly fell into bed, and fell asleep almost instantly. In the meantime, the boys assisted Daisy out of the car. They propped her up to keep her from collapsing as she was overwhelmed by nausea. The boys removed her shoes, took her bag and mobile phone, and held her hair back as Daisy vomited. After ensuring she was no longer sick, they gently laid her on the ground near her house. Concerned about being seen and the risks involved, the young men hurriedly departed in their car, leaving Daisy alone in the cold. Daisy remained exposed to the frigid 0-degree temperature for approximately 3 hours. She was without socks or shoes, clad only in a t-shirt and sports pants, her wet hair frozen. Responding to the situation, the police conducted a thorough inspection of the Coleman residence and its surroundings. Inside Daisy's room, they found 5 plastic bottles containing alcohol. Outside, they came across Daisy's bag, mobile phone, shoes, and evidence of vomit nearby. That morning, Daisy was transported to the hospital for a medical evaluation. The doctors noted bruises on her legs and signs of trauma in her genital area. A series of medical tests were conducted, revealing that her blood alcohol level was nearly double the legal limit. After spending several hours in the hospital, Daisy regained consciousness but had no recollection of the previous night's events. She admitted to consuming an excessive amount of alcohol and acknowledged taking it from her mother's cabinet without permission. Daisy also confessed to sneaking out to visit the boys' house, but she could not recall the details of what transpired there. By 11 a.m. on January 8th, just hours after the incident, police officers had located and detained Matthew Barnett, Jordan Z, and Nicholas Gramudis. The young men were charged and brought to the station for questioning. During the interrogation, Matthew Barnett acknowledged having a sexual encounter with Daisy Coleman that night, but he insisted it was consensual. He recounted that Daisy and Paige were already intoxicated when he met them. Initially, Matthew denied providing any alcohol to Daisy, but as he continued his account, inconsistencies emerged in his testimony. Ultimately, he conceded that he did offer Daisy several shots of alcohol, suggesting it was to melt her cold heart. Matthew explained that he had used a condom during the encounter and disposed of it by throwing it out of the car window while they were driving Daisy back to her house. Jordan Z initially refused to testify, but later admitted that he used his friend Nicholas's smartphone to make a video of Matthew kissing Daisy. The video lasted about 10 seconds. Jordan managed to show the clip to his friends before freaking out and deleting the video. Nicholas, who induced Daisy's friend Paige into intimacy, was the only one who immediately fully pleaded guilty. The guy was sent to a juvenile detention center. Matthew's friend, who drove the group to Daisy's house, recounted that during the ride, Daisy was continuously crying, and Matthew was worried that her brother Charlie would be furious if he found out about everything. Additionally, it emerged that Matthew had visited the Coleman family a few days before the incident, where he had dined with them in a friendly atmosphere. By 1 p.m. on January 8th, a search was conducted in the basement of Matthew Barnett's house. The police seized bed linen, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and plastic cups as part of their investigation. In the course of further interrogations, the deputy sheriff appeared to develop a sense of empathy towards Matthew's account of the events. At one point, the officer even remarked, "It's not uncommon for girls to engage in various actions to seek attention, and this might just be one of those instances." He commended Matthew for his supposed thoughtfulness in driving the girl home. However, the officer seemed to overlook the critical detail that Matthew had abandoned her outside, alone in the cold. Days later, Daisy Coleman made a full recovery, no longer facing any immediate health threats. However, she was still unable to recall any additional details about the traumatic night. By March 2012, 2 months after the incident, the charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan Z were completely dropped. The district attorney concluded that the interaction between the young individuals was consensual. The video Jordan had filmed and subsequently deleted, which allegedly showed Matthew kissing Daisy, was never recovered, despite claims from several of Jordan's classmates that they had seen it. An examination of the mobile phones belonging to Matthew and Daisy revealed sporadic communication, about once a month. In these exchanges, Daisy suggested a willingness to engage in sexual activity with Matthew in return for alcohol. There were also text messages preceding January 8th, where both Daisy and Matthew exchanged mutually explicit content of a sexual nature. After Matthew's release, it came to light that he was the grandson of Rex Barnett, a prominent politician and former member of the state legislative assembly, known for his involvement in the Committee on Criminal Law and Public Safety. Rex Barnett had established connections with many prosecutors and police officers across Missouri. Consequently, Matthew and Jordan were allowed to resume their normal lives. Meanwhile, Daisy Coleman hoped that the controversy surrounding her nightmarish ordeal would eventually subside. She resumed her studies, but instead of empathy and support from her peers, she encountered hostility and ridicule. The majority sided with Matthew, branding Daisy as deceitful and promiscuous. This sudden ostracization led Daisy to become reclusive, preferring the solitude of her home over social interactions. The girl, who once actively participated in community activities, sports, and dancing, became a shadow of her former self, even leaving the school's cheerleading squad. Simultaneously, her mother Melinda faced a barrage of anonymous threats at both home and her workplace. The situation escalated to the point where Melinda was compelled to resign from the veterinary clinic where she had been employed for many years. Confronted with this unrelenting hostility, the Coleman family made the difficult decision to relocate in the spring of 2013. Tragically, their vacant house in Maryville, which was listed for sale, mysteriously burned down. The cause of the fire remained undetermined by the police, fueling speculations that it was an act of retaliation, possibly linked to Matthew Barnett's father. Under peculiar circumstances, sometime later, the house of Daisy's friend Paige also succumbed to a fire. By then, Daisy and Paige had ceased communication, and Paige, too, found herself ostracized at school, plagued by persistent nightmares. Eventually, Daisy's ordeal gained national media attention, resonating with others across the country who had endured similar experiences. This newfound support enabled Daisy to reopen the case against Matthew Barnett, her primary antagonist. At the subsequent trial, Matthew was only found guilty of leaving Daisy exposed to the freezing temperatures. He received a sentence of 2 years probation and was ordered to pay $1,800 in restitution to the Coleman family. No further charges were pursued against the other individuals involved in the incident. Daisy Coleman continued to face life's challenges, receiving both support and threats from anonymous online sources. She grappled with the harsh reality of the unfair treatment and criticism directed at her. In 2016, when Daisy was 19 and attending college, a Netflix documentary titled Audrey and Daisy was released. This film delved into the issues of violence, bullying, and cyberbullying, along with their devastating consequences. Daisy featured prominently in the documentary, courageously sharing her personal experiences. The film also highlighted the story of another young woman, Audrey Pott from California, whose tale ended in even greater tragedy. In a tragic parallel to Daisy Coleman's experience in 2012, Audrey Pott faced a similar ordeal, but with an even more heartrending outcome. Photos of Audrey circulated rapidly online, reaching not only her friends but also her adversaries. In her final social media post, Audrey expressed her profound despair. "My life is destroyed, the whole school knows. I can never get rid of this reputation. Everyone knows how bad I am. I want it all to end." Just 9 days after this post, Audrey, overwhelmed by the relentless humiliation and unable to cope with the magnitude of her suffering, tragically took her own life. 6 months following Audrey's tragic passing, her parents successfully initiated legal proceedings. The responsible individuals, 3 boys, received sentences of 30 to 45 days for their involvement in the incident. Subsequently, their families compensated Audrey's parents with approximately $1 million for emotional damages. Shifting focus back to Daisy Coleman, in 2018, she chose to embark on a fresh start by relocating to Colorado. There, she found employment at a tattoo parlor and was engaged in a new film project, which chronicled her journey towards healing. Tragically, in June 2018, Daisy faced another heart-rending ordeal when her mother, Melinda, and brother Tristan were involved in a car accident en route to visit Daisy from their hometown. Tragically, her 19-year-old brother Tristan lost his life in the accident, the details of which remain shrouded in mystery. Following the devastating loss of her brother, Daisy Coleman turned to social media to share her inner turmoil. In a heartfelt post, she admitted that with each passing day, it became increasingly challenging to contain her inner demons, fabricate a smile, and maintain the facade that all was well. In the wake of her brother's death, Daisy became a co-founder of a non-profit organization dedicated to aiding victims of violence. She continued to openly discuss her own traumatic experiences while offering support to others facing similar adversities. Daisy often used her posts to express the difficulty she faced managing her emotional distress, grappling with panic attacks, and being haunted by relentless nightmarish recollections. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman began telling friends that she was being followed by an unknown man sending her threats. She reported this to the police, saying the individual had been stalking her since December 2019 and pleading for help, but her pleas were ignored. On Tuesday, August 4, 2020, Daisy wrote on Twitter about her fear of leaving her house, unable to walk her dog or go to work due to her terror. She wrote that she had stopped eating and sleeping. Hours later, Daisy posted on Facebook that an unknown man had approached her house and knocked on the door. Frightened, she suspected he might have stolen her keys and could break into her house. Daisy also wrote that this man had stolen her photos and created a profile on a website, offering intimacy for money under her identity. After reading her daughter's social media posts, Daisy's mother, Melinda, called the Colorado police for a welfare check. At 4 p.m., officers arrived at her house and she let them in. They stayed for about an hour, talking to her about the stalking. The officers noticed nothing unusual in Daisy's behavior, but shortly after they left, Daisy video called her boyfriend, took out a gun, pointed it at herself, and pulled the trigger. The boyfriend initially didn't understand what happened as the call dropped. Daisy stopped responding to calls, and the boyfriend called 911. When police returned to Daisy Coleman's house at 8 p.m., they found her dead. Daisy's mother, Melinda, announced her daughter's death by publishing a post on social media. She wrote, "She was my best friend and a wonderful daughter. How I wish I could have taken her pain onto myself. She never recovered from what those young boys did to her back in school, and it's just not fair. My daughter is gone from us." The mother confessed that she had fought for Daisy and her mental health for many years. She believed that she had done everything possible for her beloved daughter. The mother admitted that her daughter had indeed been pursued by a stalker in recent months. Also, Daisy had recently found out that she would never be able to have children. After Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The thief stole an album with Daisy's exclusive drawings and her tattoo machine. 4 months later, in December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman wrote another touching post on social media dedicated to her beloved daughter. Afterwards, the woman took a gun and did the same thing as her daughter Daisy had done. In the Coleman family, only 2 sons remained, the older Charlie and the younger Logan. Daisy's charitable organization organized a fundraising effort to support the boys. It is known that the life and career of Matthew Barnett are going well and successfully. After the deaths of Daisy and her mother, Melinda, the man expressed his condolences for what happened to the Coleman family. "In a world where children should feel safe and loved by their parents, something terrible happened. On June 15, 2023, the lives of 3 young boys, 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase, were tragically cut short. The culprit behind this heartbreaking incident was their 32-year-old father, Chad Durman, who shocked the nation with his involvement in his own children's deaths. From the brutal act of taking their children's lives to later sitting calmly on the porch, each moment unfolds a chilling narrative of horror. In the quiet town of Monroe, Ohio, a father's love turned into a twisted act of violence on June 15, 2023. 3 young boys were senselessly killed and left their mother and community in a state of shock and disbelief. Chad Durman, the father, was charged with this horrific crime. Initially, he confessed to his actions, but later he pleaded not guilty, adding to the mystery surrounding his motive and involvement. As the investigation proceeded, disturbing details about the incident emerged, painting a chilling picture of a father's descent into unthinkable cruelty. As the legal proceedings continued, the world watches anxiously, hoping for justice for the innocent lives lost and searching for answers to the haunting question: what could drive a father to commit such a horrific crime against his own children? Chad Christopher Durman, a 32-year-old from Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. They have a teenage stepdaughter named Alexis, who is 16 years old. Chad and Laura also had 3 young sons together, aged 3, 4, and 7, named Hunter, Clayton, and Chase, who always stayed together and loved sports. They were funny and sweet boys. Laura, their mom, stayed at home while Chad worked to support the family. They lived in a simple 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in New Richmond, a small town of about 2,800 people along the Ohio River in Claremont County. They were an ordinary family until tragedy struck. So on June 15, 2023, Chad came home from work a bit earlier than usual. He then decided to take a nap with his family, so he invited his wife Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom. They all sat together and were having a good time, laughing and chatting. But little did Laura know that those moments of happiness would soon turn into unimaginable horror. After a few minutes of chatting and laughing, Chad got up and opened the gun safe, which was right next to their bed. He took the Marlin Model HC-22 rifle, loaded the magazine, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. His daughter Alexis was watching television in the family room when she heard the sound of a gunshot. She hurried to the primary bedroom to see what had happened. As she reached the doorway, she witnessed the horrifying sight of her brother being shot. Alexis was terrified. She turned and ran as fast as she could. Laura, who was with her kids, ran to provide aid to her child Hunter. She then shouted at the other kids to run and save their lives. Alexis noticed the oldest boy running out the wrong door toward a field. She shouted for him to keep running. Chad was following him, and within moments, he shot his 7-year-old son Clayton. After Clayton fell to the ground and was bleeding badly, Chad stood next to him as if he had achieved his goals. Alexis was witnessing all of that. She was horrified, and then she ran to the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and fled to safety, desperate to protect their lives. Chad ran towards Alexis and caught her and raised his gun and asked her to put the 3-year-old Chase down. Alexis cried and pleaded with Chad not to shoot her and also begged him to stop. Chad tried to shoot her in the head, but luckily he ran out of bullets. At that moment, Alexis ran to the fire station where she urgently stopped a woman who was passing by her house.
She told the woman that her stepfather killed all her family. The woman then called 911 at 4:15 p.m.
The girl running down the street saying that her stepfather is killing everyone in her family.
And what did the female say to you?
And she says that her stepfather is killing everybody in her house. I did. I'm on the phone with them right now.
Did she say how or what was happening?
I asked her to get in the car with me, and she said she couldn't leave her family.
Can you tell how many people have been shot?
I think 2 children.
Okay.
Meanwhile, 3-year-old Chase returned to his mother. Suddenly, Chad and Laura started arguing over Chase. Chad tried to pull Chase out of Laura's arms, but she was holding onto him tightly, trying to protect him. Shockingly, Chad then bit Laura and then pressed the gun against her thumb and fired. Laura dropped Chase because she was wounded badly. Chad then shot Chase in the head and later arranged the lifeless bodies of all 3 children in a line. After killing all 3 of them, he sat calmly on his front porch, acting like nothing happened. While Laura was inside the house, she was continuously shouting for help. After the 911 call, the police arrived at the scene at 4:25 p.m.
Stand up! Stand up now! Stand up! Stand the fuck up!
EMS to stage and air clear. You're gonna go ahead and fly whenever any units can advise.
Get your hands up here.
72.
Cover 21. It's in the air.
Those guys confirmed that there's people.
When police arrived, Chad was sitting on the porch of his house with
A rifle beside him. The police officers quickly caught him and placed him in handcuffs. Chad appeared calm and did not resist being restrained. While one officer controlled him, the other attended to the 3 victims. Paramedics tried to save the children, but unfortunately they all died from their gunshot injuries. Later, Laura was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center for her injuries. Chad Durman's stepdaughter Alexis was lucky to have survived the shooting. She had managed to escape from the house. On the same day that he killed his 3 sons, June 15, 2023, Chad was arrested at 4:27 p.m.
What are you doing, man?
Hey, pretty copy all this.
Can I roll over? I ain't gonna hurt you. I ain't gonna hurt nobody.
You got anything on you?
No, I ain't got nothing, man. Phone, that's it. I ain't mad, I ain't nothing. Just make sure that dog don't come out. I don't think he'll bite you. Just don't reach for him and try to grab him and pet him.
All right.
He won't bite you.
What's going on, man?
Nothing. Can I stand up? It's kind of uncomfortable.
I'm gonna
I
get
ain't
you
gonna
here
do
in a
nothing. I ain't
second.
running away. You can do whatever you want.
When the police officers caught him, he was surprisingly calm and polite, behaving as though nothing had happened. Later, he was taken to jail for more questioning and investigation.
Just kind of face that window on your right there for a minute. Just face it.
What's your name? Chad. Have you ever been here before?
Only one time for fighting with Dad.
During the interrogation, Chad Durman admitted to police that he had been planning the killings since October 2022. Chad also confessed to the investigators that he hadn't slept for 3 to 4 days because the thought of killing his own sons was unbearable. These revelations painted a disturbing picture of his state of mind leading up to the tragic events. The investigation continued, and investigators explored whether Chad had a history of general violence. They also checked his phone records. Upon reviewing the records, it was also found that he mainly had traffic violations in Claremont County, with the exception of one incident when he was 18 involving criminal damage. Additionally, there was a domestic violence case in 2010, where he was accused of choking his father, Keith Durman. Later, the case was dropped when Keith Durman failed to appear in court to testify for the prosecution. These records provided insight into Chad's legal history and past interactions with law enforcement in the county. As the investigation was going on, one of the neighbors, Richard Kincannon, told a news channel he was angry every day. There wasn't a day he didn't yell at his wife and kids out there.
He was very angry. Every day yelling at his wife, dogging her, downgrading the kids, just very angry. And if they didn't do what he said, and I've seen it firsthand, but I never thought that he would do that.
The woman who called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel and said,
She was running with a little black lab and she was screaming, call 911, call 911. She says, my stepfather is shooting everyone in my household.
Investigators also examined whether there were any signs of financial difficulties. They found out from the county auditor's website that Durman purchased his converted manufactured home on 3 acres in 2016 for $75,000. According to the records, he paid property taxes up to 2023, indicating there were no obvious issues with mortgage payments. Detectives also interviewed 59-year-old Keith Durman, Chad's father. He was in utter shock to hear what his child did. He told the investigators, "I'm still trying to comprehend." Keith Durman said that he couldn't believe his child had done something so horrible. He even said, "There was something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. I can't talk to him. They aren't letting me talk to him, so I don't have any answers. He probably hid a lot of stuff from me." His father tearfully described him as a good kid, expressing deep distress over the situation. He said, "I don't know if it was financial. I don't know if it was mental. I don't know if it was work-related. I don't know." He even described his son as a fun-loving guy and emphasized his son had never been in trouble with the law. His father's statement was somewhat misleading, as his son had encountered legal issues in the past. Although both cases were dismissed for reasons that remain unclear, the community was deeply shaken by the news of the killings. Neighbors expressed surprise, saying they never expected such actions from Chad. He had presented himself as a great and caring father on social media and in conversations with neighbors, and they said they were not looking for any other suspects. They focused their investigations solely on Chad Durman, aiming to uncover the motives and details surrounding the tragic incident involving his children. During interrogation, Chad initially pleaded guilty and confessed to everything he had done. However, during the first court hearing on June 23, 2023, he maintained his innocence and entered a plea of not guilty to the charges against him. Later, during his court hearing on Friday, June 23rd, Chad looked very upset. He wore a green bulletproof vest and cried while prosecutors talked about the terrible events that happened on June 15th.
Judge, the case is still new. We're still discovering facts. But the evil horror of what we know is impossible to process. In an act of just incomprehensible cruelty, the father that stands before you lined up his 3 young boys, and he executed them in his own home with a rifle. They were ages 3, 4, and 7, Judge.
During the hearing, David Gast, the chief prosecutor of municipal court in Claremont County, shared disturbing details about the case. He stated that Chad had carefully planned the events. He revealed that one of Chad's sons had tried to run away from him in a nearby field, but Chad had chased and caught the boy and brought him back to the yard, where he was killed along with his brothers. Gast even said, "The trauma that this man has inflicted on his family, community, law enforcement, first responders, and all of the rest of us is unspeakable. There has been a full admission in this case. The case is still new. We're still discovering facts, but the evil horror of what we know is impossible to process." He called Chad's killings of his sons one of the most monstrous, craven, cowardly acts that will ever be our misfortune of seeing. A bill of particulars that was filed in Claremont County provided all the information to the judge. All the incidents that happened were read aloud by the prosecutor. According to the prosecutor, Chad lined up the boys and shot them, and even Chad told the investigators that he had planned the killings. The prosecutor said when their mother tried to stop him, she was also shot in the hand. The prosecutor said that the father, Chad, shot 9 times, causing immense harm. One boy was hit once, while the other 2 were each shot 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark Teclouve, told the judge how cruelly Chad killed his 3 sons. He said the brutal act left the family and community in a state of shock. Not only this, the prosecutor also said that Chad even confessed to the murder and said, "I did it. Take me to jail. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have shot them." Prosecutor Mark Teclouve also told the judge that Chad pleaded guilty during the interrogation, so he wanted the death penalty for him.
The prosecutor in this case, Mark Teclouve, has made it clear he will not settle for anything less than having Chad Durman executed.
After the court hearing, Teclouve said to one of the news channels, "This is by far the most sickening, horrifying crime I have seen. I can only imagine the terror that these little boys felt and experienced as their father, their protector, was murdering them. We will do our utmost within my office to see this defendant never see the light of day again."
First and foremost, I want to start out by expressing the deepest sympathy I have for this family, for this unspeakable tragedy. I can't go into a whole lot of facts, all right, because this is a death penalty case, and my goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering these 3 little boys.
Teclouve said that his goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering these 3 young boys. It was an incomprehensible act of horror that he perpetuated on the family. Initially, Chad faced a total of 21 charges related to the tragic events that unfolded on June 15, 2023. Specifically, he was accused of shooting and killing 3 young children, including 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase, in an execution-style manner.
What's more, now a grand jury has indicted Durman on 21 counts, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. Now, he could potentially face the death penalty if he's convicted on these charges.
Initially, charges against him included 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. These serious charges reflect the severity of the allegations against Chad Durman in connection with the tragic deaths of his children. The Claremont County Municipal Court Judge, Jason Nagel, decided that Chad should be kept in the Claremont County Jail and set his bail at $20 million.
At this point in time, bond's going to be set in the amount of $20 million cash or surety. Anything else at this time, Mr. Gast?
No, Judge.
Mr. Cal? Mr. Cal, anything further?
Nothing at this time.
Chad Durman's bond, which was set at $20 million, was reportedly the highest bond ever set in the county's history. During another court hearing, Chad Durman's lawyer requested the court to take the death penalty off the table because he said Chad was suffering from a serious mental illness when he shot and killed his 3 sons on June 15, 2023.
Guilty by reason of insanity, Chad Durman has entered a new plea now more than 9 months after Claremont County prosecutors say he executed his 3 young sons. Experts will also be taking another look now at Durman's mental state at the time of the killing.
Chad's lawyer even said, executing the seriously mentally ill is cruel and unusual punishment in violation of both the Ohio and United States constitutions. Persons suffering from serious mental illness at the time of the alleged commission of the offense are not morally culpable to the same extent as others.
Durman has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution, though, has requested a mental evaluation.
Later, a court date was set for May 3, 2024. To discuss the lawyer's request, Chad's lawyers had agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024, to support their claim that he was mentally ill when the crime occurred. During another court hearing in March 2024, Chad's lawyers argued in court that the Claremont County Sheriff's deputies did not respect his Miranda rights after he was arrested.
A judge has ruled that Chad Durman's confession that he allegedly gave during his interrogation will be thrown out. On Friday, the judge ruled that the defendant's rights were violated twice when police skipped parts of the Miranda warnings and when detectives continued questioning Chad Durman after he asked for an attorney.
The prosecution presented several witnesses, including police officers who responded to the scene. They were asked to describe their encounters with Chad. The prosecutors said that nearly all of Chad's interactions with the sheriff's deputies and detectives were recorded. The first witness to testify in court was Claremont County Deputy Chad Poffman, who was a canine handler. Deputy Poffman said he was the first officer to arrive at the scene. When he approached Chad's home, the first thing he saw was the defendant sitting on the porch near a rifle. As they drove to the sheriff's office, Chad shouted some things that the deputy couldn't make out. However, at one point, the deputy said he heard Chad clearly say, "Take me to jail." Detective Michael Ross from the Claremont County Sheriff's Office was also questioned in the court. He said Chad knew what was being read to him because he said, "Yep," before the detective finished reading the rights. He said during the questioning in the interrogation room, Chad repeatedly denied killing his sons. However, he later said something that Detective Ross said he considered very important. Chad mentioned the Bible during his testimony. Detective Ross remembered Chad saying something important. He said, "The Bible says you kill your firstborn, your secondborn, and your thirdborn, but first you kill your wife. I didn't kill my wife."
Suspect who's in custody clearly asked for a lawyer.
If they clearly ask for a lawyer, which I've done on other cases, on other homicide cases, they clearly ask for a lawyer, I stop questioning them,
right?
Which I've done before. In this case, he did not clearly say he wanted a lawyer.
But you said that you tried to clarify it with him. That's what you're saying?
According to court documents, Chad asked for a lawyer after the questioning started, but the detective didn't listen to him.
Everybody knows, we trust, except perhaps for the detectives involved, that when a custodial interrogation is underway and the suspect clearly says, "I want a lawyer," that isn't the start of a test. That isn't the start of an officer's invitation to a detective to quiz about name, rank, and serial number of a lawyer. That's the time they stop.
Also, the motion to suppress states that Detective Ross left Chad alone for a while and then returned and continued questioning him as if Chad hadn't asked for a lawyer. The defense lawyer later asked Detective Ross if he had read Chad his Miranda rights in full. Ross replied that he hadn't, but he believed he had covered the most important parts.
All right, now you discussed briefly the Miranda rights. You did not read all the Miranda rights on State's Exhibit 3, did you? On your card.
Word for word, no.
Well, you left out some pretty important parts, didn't you?
So after a long court hearing, the judge decided that the investigators did not follow the rules when they arrested Chad in June 2023. Judge Richard Ferenc stated that Chad's Miranda rights were not respected. Chad's lawyers also claimed that he asked for a lawyer at least twice during his 3-hour interrogation session, but the detectives ignored his request and kept asking him questions. The lawyer also said that Chad pleaded guilty earlier because he was under the pressure of investigators. Later, the judge decided that the detectives did not fully explain Chad's rights before interrogating him, so any statements he made during that time would not be used in the next court proceedings. This decision affected how Chad's trial would proceed, as it restricted the evidence that could be presented against him. This legal twist added complexity to the trial, prolonging the legal process and intensifying public interest in the outcome of the case.
Durman could face the death penalty if he is convicted, and his case is scheduled to go to trial in July. But now with this recent ruling, that could change. This is big, big news and could really be key to this case.
A final court hearing for Chad is set for June 14th, just before the first anniversary of the tragic events. His trial is expected to start on July 8th, 2024.
Essentially, we're looking at July 8th through August 2nd.
So what was the motive behind his killings? The authorities have not yet determined the motive behind his actions. The reason Chad shot Clayton, Hunter, and Chase is unclear, but some people speculate that he did it to hurt his 34-year-old wife because he believed she was cheating on him, but this hasn't been confirmed.
A memorial ride for the Durman boys. Earlier today, hundreds of people came out to this fundraiser where all the money goes to their family. So while the boys' father is waiting to go on trial for their murders, the community feels this fundraiser is the very least that they can do.
A 15-mile ride through New Richmond.
As you can look around, we're close to 1,000 people.
Alan Easterday organized a memorial motorcycle, jeep, and car ride, which attracted over 100 participants to raise funds for the family. Another memorial service was held on June 26 to honor the three boys. Community members gathered at First Baptist Church of Glen Estee, dressed in bright colors as requested by the family.
And 24 hours later, the community still struggling to make sense of the shootings and the 3 innocent lives that were taken. Support for family, friends, classmates, first responders is pouring into Monroe Township with no signs of stopping. WLWT News 5's Shatera McGee is live in Monroe Township, where
Since the tragic event, many people have come together to remember the 3 young boys who were lost. One of these services was a special candlelight vigil at the elementary school where the oldest boy used to go to school. The co-funding organizer, Rachel Brown, started a fundraising campaign on GoFundMe to help pay for the 3 deceased children's funerals. So far, people have donated almost $180,000, which is much more than the initial goal. Rachel Brown mentioned in a post that the children's mother was like a sister to her. She wrote, "My sister lost her 3 amazing babies yesterday. Nothing will make this better. It will never be okay. But please, if you can find it in your heart to help relieve the financial burden of this tragedy, please donate. No one should ever have to go through this. You must be wondering where Chad Durman is now. He is held in custody in Claremont County Jail, and his case is still ongoing, with many questions still on everyone's mind. Why did he do that? How can someone kill their own children so brutally? The answer to these questions remains a mystery, but the community is hopeful that justice will be served and the truth will be revealed. The community is still trying to come to terms with the loss of these 3 young boys. Everyone wants to find a way to heal and move forward. As the legal process continues, people are united in their desire for justice. The tragic events have also led to discussions about family relationships, mental health, and how communities can support each other. People are coming together to help the surviving family members and make sure something like this never happens again. You can pressure me. It doesn't matter to me. Call anyone you like, people with high reputation. They have known me for many years, and I am just myself. What you see is me, and I love, and loved my husband more than my own life. The above statements, recorded by the police of Georgia and the USA, became an example of how greed affects a person's consciousness, especially when irresistible factors and attractions converge. This tangled story, in the smallest details, shows how much horror can be hidden behind the closed doors of what seems to be a happy family. James Edward Conley was born on February 22, 1950, in Dayton, Montgomery County, Ohio, USA. He was the son of Ruth Slack and John Conley. They had 4 more daughters and 3 sons. The family was affluent. His paternal grandfather, Fred Conley, founded a successful company and invented one of the first price marking machines, receiving about 300 patents.
Little is known about James's childhood and youth. Instead of working in the family business, James chose the path of a manual therapist. He moved to North Georgia, where he diligently worked on creating a successful company in the field of holistic medicine. He was assisted by Bonnie White, who managed the accounting, and he treated her children and grandchildren with chiropractic. As Bonnie herself recounted, James's human qualities became the key to winning over a loyal clientele. With each passing year, his business grew, and James realized that he needed new employees. It was then that a young 21-year-old woman applied for a job and was accepted. She was to be responsible for receiving visitors at the company. Teresa Lynn Box, a girl from Harlan, Kentucky, met when she got a job at his company. Despite a 20-year age difference, they fell in love and started dating. In 1996, they had a son named Caleb, and a year later, they got married and opened the Alpha Wellness Center in Dalton, Georgia, where Teresa worked as a massage therapist. According to Caleb, his mother had a somewhat unusual drive for perfection, especially considering her roots. My mom was from Harlan, a small town where women stayed at home and took care of their families. But my mom never liked that. She always wanted to take care of herself, to achieve more and better, Caleb said. Already being a friend of the couple, Bonnie witnessed their professional development. She said that Teresa was indeed an excellent massage therapist. Their second child, Allison, was born in 2000. Soon after her birth, the family moved to a spacious home next to a tennis court in Ringgold, Georgia. The marriage was stable and happy, and the children grew up in comfort and love. Christmas was a beautiful time. It was Caleb's favorite time of the year. Among the gifts, the Christmas tree, and the warmth of the home fireplace, he dreamed of many things. To provide protection for himself and consequently his loved ones, at some point, James turned to the insurance agent Tom Drew to have him issue a life insurance policy for $500,000, leaving Teresa as the sole beneficiary. At the same time, he also insured their house, but over time, this seemingly perfect life began to crumble as rumors of infidelity in the Conley marriage spread among the employees of the Alpha Wellness Center. Eventually, everyone found out. However, the situation began to deteriorate due to rumors of infidelity in the marriage and financial difficulties. James contracted Lyme disease, which led to his inability to work. Teresa underwent 4 surgeries and lost their third child, leading to her depression and substance abuse. Around the same time, Bonnie discovered that Teresa was illegally embezzling money from the business. In 1 month, Teresa herself wrote 16 checks. When James confronted her about this in Bonnie's presence, his wife denied everything, claiming that the checks were canceled. However, Bonnie, as the accountant, stated that canceled checks wouldn't have gone through the bank, and then she showed a bank statement, putting Teresa in a difficult position. Moreover, among the employees of the couple's business, a new rumor began to spread that Teresa was putting lithium in her husband's coffee. In fact, James suspected this and, not wanting to hide it, began to spread the information himself. Although it was not fully clarified, the investigation indicated that a divorce between the husband and wife was even considered. By mid-2007, the family's situation became unstable. 2 of their cars were repossessed, and James appeared noticeably depressed. Everything changed when the couple received a notice that they were going to be evicted from their home for non-payment of the mortgage. However, Teresa developed a plan that, despite its unorthodoxy, promised to provide a final solution to all her crises, whether marital, financial, or existential. Her first step was to impersonate her husband and write a letter in which he supposedly informed Agent Tom of his decision to end his life. Then, early in the morning on Friday, June 29, 2007, she was ready to put the remaining part of her plan into action. During breakfast, which Teresa traditionally shared with her husband, she spiked the food with strong antidepressants, while she herself refused to eat, saying that her friend would soon come for her and the children. All that was known about this person was that his name was Robin. As soon as the medicine started affecting James, the woman put the children in the car and left them in the care of her friend. Then Teresa returned to the house and hurried to store away some items she considered valuable, including photographs of her children. After that, she set a fire between the office and one of the bedrooms. Caleb and his sister noticed that their mother was the last to leave the house, after which she lit a cigarette. At that moment, from the car, the boy saw smoke coming from the house. Frightened, he tried to warn his mother. However, She replied that he had nothing to worry about, as it was just some papers burning. Soon after, Gary Carlock, the owner of a local grocery store, was on his way to work when he saw smoke coming from a house and called emergency services. At exactly 9:42 a.m., a fire brigade arrived at the scene. They immediately realized that it was impossible to stop the fire from the outside, so they decided to enter the house through the back door where the bedroom was located. As a firefighter examined the room, an alarming silhouette appeared on the screen. It was undoubtedly the thermal signature of a person through the smoke. We approached him. He was kneeling by the bed, as if he was praying or something. He was unconscious, but it seemed like he didn't have thermal burns. His clothes and skin were covered in smoke, reported the firefighter. As the firefighters explained, the scene was typical of what often happens during a fire. They preliminarily identified that it was the homeowner, 57-year-old James, and almost immediately declared him dead. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed everything in its path, including any DNA evidence or signs of a crime, and the authorities initially considered the death to be an accident. By the time the officers in Georgia managed to contact Teresa by phone to report the news, she had already left town to visit her parents. My mom and Robin answered the call, and I remember Robin yelling at her to stop the car. Mom just threw herself on the ground and started crying. Despite such a tumultuous and emotional reaction, a few minutes later, the first person Teresa called was her insurance agent. As for the children, they were completely devastated. They loved their father, and despite all the problems they had, he never stopped constantly letting them know how important they were in his life. Meanwhile, a large-scale investigation began. However, without any leads, the work progressed quite slowly. Teresa returned home in the evening and told the authorities that she had left the house at 8:15 a.m., stopping along the way at a restaurant to grab a bite. Robin was also questioned, and although his statements largely matched the woman's, he said that they left half an hour later at 8:45 a.m. The fire investigator decided that the fire's point of origin was along the common wall between the office and the bedroom where the victim was located. As officers continued to inspect the house, a trained dog was brought in, and with its help, the presence of an accelerant placed right at the fire's origin was discovered. It was now clear that it was arson, not an accidental fire. Trying to establish the exact chronology of events on July 5, 2007, officers interrogated Teresa. During this conversation, she indicated that she loved her husband more than life itself. She also spoke about financial difficulties, which she exclusively associated with James's illness. But overall, the woman painted a picture of, if not a perfect, then at least a reliable and stable marriage. Friends and colleagues of James confirmed that as his health deteriorated, he stopped working and the business began to falter. It was then that Tom contacted the authorities and reported that he had recently received a handwritten letter from James, in which James confessed his intention to end his existence. However, it was hard to believe that he chose such a method. It seemed just incredible. There were countless ways to do it much simpler, less painful, and less dramatic. Meanwhile, the forensic examination established that the cause of death was smoke inhalation, and the toxicological examination showed that James was under the influence of strong antidepressants before the fire started. Moreover, burn marks were found on the soles of his feet, indicating that he had tried to extinguish the fire. Faced with such evidence, forensic psychologist Maida Sanji was convinced that it was a murder. Detectives questioned Robin again about the discrepancies between his chronology of events and Teresa's. He stated that after putting the children in the car, the woman returned to the house and did not come back for another 15 to 20 minutes. The team's next task was to obtain records from the restaurant where they had stopped for a snack. It was seen that Teresa and her children arrived there at 9:17 a.m. that Friday. The family's home was less than a 10-minute drive from that place. Continuing to study the chronology of events, 2 officers discovered that Teresa was in the house when the fire started. As a result, the police obtained a warrant to search the Conley home. Upon arriving, they found many personal belongings of the family stored in the external garage. In addition, there were divorce documents found, which apparently had not been filed. Later, they learned about the life insurance policy and the home insurance policy. When agents focused on Teresa, they learned details related to the loss of her last child and subsequent drug addiction. From that moment, considering the evidence found, she was considered the main suspect. During a subsequent interrogation, the couple's employees talked about rumors of infidelity, so the police decided to call Teresa again. During the second conversation with the detectives, the woman not only defended herself, but also began to change her narrative. Suddenly, her husband turned out to be a cruel maniac, and she even stated that in her opinion, he was capable of setting the fire himself, even if it meant complete destruction of the property. I don't think you're being honest. What are you telling me? Do you think I set up my husband? No, I'm just saying that you're not entirely truthful. Although Teresa did not break down, the detective doubled down and insisted. Well, tell us. Tell us again about the morning. What time did you wake up and so on? I don't know, we always woke up at 6:37 halls, drank coffee together, or talked. I don't know. That's what you do before you get the kids up. The medications found in James's blood were the first topic the officers wanted to address. So they started by asking Teresa what medications her husband was taking. Initially, she listed them without any problems. But when the detectives wanted to know which specific medications caused James to be drowsy, she suddenly forgot the name. Give me a minute, it starts with C. Maybe C-Carvel, she said. Then they asked about the insurance policy, which they believed was more than enough to solve the woman's problems. But Teresa's actions amounted to playing the victim and downplaying the importance of the question, responding that she didn't even want to know the value of the policy. It was clear that this was going to be tough work, and Teresa was not giving up. But the investigators had another equally important detail. It was then they mentioned the presence of a catalyst at the crime scene, and again, she seemed to find a way out. Teresa defended herself, saying that a few days earlier, her husband had been painting the house, which justified the presence of the substance. Moreover, she suggested that it might have been the cause of the fire. They found it even more astonishing that she mentioned how it could have accelerated the spread of the flames. When Teresa said that they drank coffee together every morning, the officers suspected that she used this opportunity to slip her husband a sedative so that he wouldn't notice anything. However, in discussing this, Teresa stated that in recent months her husband hadn't been drinking coffee. This clearly contradicted what she had said just minutes earlier, and they pointed this out to her. The woman delved deeper into denial, refusing her own words and contradicting herself. At that time, the evidence the investigators had was nothing more than circumstantial, until one of them suggested subjecting her to a lie detector test, proposing that she would do everything to prove that she did not take her husband's life. However, before undergoing the test, Teresa had to sign a written agreement stating that if she failed the test, the authorities could use this against her in court. At that moment, the woman was no longer concerned about the fire. Now she was worried that the detectives knew about the numerous affairs she had behind her husband's back, as before taking the test, she wanted to know exactly how much information they had on her. A mistake could fully compromise her. But in any case, the computer during the test showed that her level of deception exceeded 100%. Thus, based on the cumulative evidence, on July 9, 2007, 34-year-old Teresa was charged with premeditated murder and 2 counts of first-degree arson. Her lawyer claimed that the fire had been planned by her and her husband together in order to improve their financial situation. After the woman's arrest, Arson, who was 6 at the time, and Caleb, who was 11, were placed under the care of the Georgia State Family Services for Children. On July 16th, Caleb was interrogated by detectives, displaying a possibly unusual level of interest for his age. The boy detailed that morning's events, including his mother's return to the house while he and his sister were in the car. He added that he noticed smoke immediately afterwards. According to Caleb, his parents often burned trash behind their house. The investigators found it unlikely that Teresa would decide to do this right before a trip. They considered it more likely that she had drugged her husband with medications in the morning and then set the bedroom on fire while he was still in bed. Understandably, it was very hard for the children. However, despite the traumatic experience deeply affecting their young minds, they remained strong. Later, their maternal grandparents were able to obtain guardianship, and the court was compassionate enough to allow Teresa to visit them. After this, the police presented Teresa with evidence and made it clear that her children could be called as witnesses to testify against her. Her defense initially approached the district attorney's office requesting recommendations for a plea deal. The deputy district attorney, who investigated the case, admitted to reaching a fair and adequate plea agreement. Not wanting her children to go through such trauma, 2 days after the trial began, Teresa agreed to the deal. Thus, early on the morning of Friday, December 10, 2010, a hearing took place. The judge asked Teresa if she pleaded guilty to manslaughter with aggravating circumstances. to which she affirmatively responded. She then told the court that she had participated in these events as part of a financial conspiracy, but never intended to harm her husband. Therefore, she appealed to the court for mercy. The trial court accepted this statement, and as a result, she was allowed more visitation with her children. She was also found guilty of first-degree arson. While the state agreed to drop the charge of premeditated murder, Teresa was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. When Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, first laid eyes on Catherine Pileggi, a flight attendant, he was struck by an immediate sense of falling in love. Little did he know at that moment how their serendipitous meeting in the skies would ultimately conclude. Ronald Vinci, born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. In his 20s, he embarked on his first business venture, renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego, where he began selling Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop evolved into one of the largest Honda dealership centers in California. Ron's success didn't stop there. He went on to open several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. Those who worked for Vinci often described him as a resolute and strong-willed individual, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald Vinci's personal life included a previous marriage to a woman named Pamela, and together, they had a son named Carey. However, their marriage eventually ended in divorce after several years. Following his divorce, Ron began to indulge in a lavish lifestyle, spending his wealth on extravagant toys. He developed a passion for collecting airplanes and helicopters, even going so far as to acquire a large hangar for housing his collection. Ronald resided in a spacious house located in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He went to great lengths to obtain permission from the county commission to construct a helicopter pad on his property, despite objections from his neighbors. This allowed him to conveniently commute to work by helicopter directly from his home. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his car dealerships, further facilitating his aerial transportation. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Ronald Vinci and 34-year-old Catherine Pileggi crossed in an unexpected place: the sky. Catherine worked as a flight attendant on an airplane when the two first met. Catherine Pileggi hailed from a tight-knit family and grew up in a rural area in Georgia. During her youth, she took part in beauty pageants and won hearts with her charisma and radiant smile. Her beauty and pleasant demeanor attracted many admirers and suitors. After completing her education, Catherine spent several years working as a lab technician in a veterans hospital. However, her aspirations reached beyond her job, and she always yearned for more in life. In 1980, Catherine made a significant career change by leaving the hospital and joining Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. Her annual income at that time amounted to $20,000. She took pleasure in her new job, tending to passengers' needs and serving meals. Catherine even possessed some practical knowledge, such as using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors, a handy tit for dealing with spills on airplane seats. In 1990, a decade after starting her career as a flight attendant, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire who was immediately drawn to her charming and ever-smiling personality. Despite the significant 14-year age gap between them, the couple embarked on a romantic relationship. Catherine left her career as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious home in California. Together, they shared a passion for travel, with Aspen, Colorado, being a favorite destination for their getaways. Ron and Catherine's relationship spanned a decade, during which the millionaire never proposed to the flight attendant. Eventually, they decided to go their separate ways. Catherine relocated to Florida in search of a new partner and a fresh start. In April 2001, at the age of 45, Catherine began a relationship with 63-year-old Duilio Carolano, who worked as an insurance agent and was financially well off. The couple was introduced through mutual friends. Catherine confided in Duilio about her previous relationship with the millionaire, describing a tumultuous and unhappy time where her ex-partner insulted her, had issues with heavy drinking, and openly discussed his affairs with other women. She revealed that she had endured this situation for a decade, hoping for a marriage proposal from Ronald Vinci, which never came. Duilio, on the other hand, wasted no time and promptly proposed to Catherine. The couple tied the knot in May 2001, just a month after they first met. Catherine was content with the marriage, and after their wedding, They began living together in Miami Beach, Florida. Duilio described Catherine's early demeanor in their life together as resembling a domestic cat. Gentle, calm, quiet, and with minimal eating habits. Additionally, Catherine had a profound fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean, sea, or river, experiencing intense anxiety upon entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Duilio began to notice a significant change in his wife, Catherine's behavior. She increasingly requested money from him, demanding funds for clothes, gifts, and comparing him to her friends' more generous husbands. Duilio estimated that Catherine was withdrawing approximately $5,000 per month from him. She used the excuse of educational expenses, but failed to provide any receipts or evidence of such expenditures. After a few months of enduring this financial strain, Duilio decided that he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. Given their lack of children or shared property, the separation was relatively straightforward. Court documents revealed that Duilio Carolano had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine was preparing to move out of Duilio's house, she expressed a sense of sadness and despair, saying, "What's the point of living? I don't succeed in anything. There's just no meaning in my life." In 2005, Ronald Vinci, the millionaire, made a significant life move by relocating to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He was convinced by friends that Florida offered favorable climate conditions and low taxes. At this point, Ron had already sold his car dealerships and had accumulated substantial wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he acquired a luxurious apartment on the 41st floor, enjoying the comforts of his new residence. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine Pelleggi, the flight attendant he had dated previously. Catherine moved into Ron's apartment, and the couple resumed their connection. Interestingly, Catherine's former husband, Duilio Carolano, also resided in the same building, but on a floor 30 levels below. Duilio couldn't fathom why Catherine had reconnected with the millionaire she had once described as a monster. As their relationship continued, Catherine's dreams of marrying the millionaire consumed her thoughts. Both Ronald and Catherine were no longer employed and lived a life of leisure. Their stark differences became even more apparent with time. Ronald was overweight and took pleasure in indulging in rich foods, while Catherine, on the other hand, ate sparingly and maintained a weight of only 42 kilograms. Ronald was known for his love of lively parties, while Catherine preferred spending most of her time at home, engrossed in crime stories. She seldom wore dresses, favoring shorts and sneakers for her daily attire. Catherine and Ron often journeyed together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting the Caribbean islands by air. Catherine's diary entries expressed her ocean phobia and detailed Ron's continuous encouragement for her to conquer her aquaphobia. Her decision to join him on these expeditions, despite her fears, suggests Ron's persuasive impact and possible insistence on her facing her anxieties. Despite Ronald's substantial wealth, he had a penchant for visiting budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront. With his friends, he would order $1 tacos and strong drinks. Ronald may have been the life of the party, flirting with women, but he would often humorously remark that his male prowess had long waned. Their home frequently hosted gatherings where Ronald would indulge in alcohol and become increasingly outspoken. On occasion, he would publicly insult Catherine in front of their friends, suggesting that she owed everything to him. Catherine, ever composed, played a passive role at these parties, quietly fulfilling all of Ronald's intoxicated demands, from serving drinks and snacks to tending to his friends. This pattern continued for 5 years, but the millionaire remained hesitant to propose marriage to Catherine. In fact, by 2010, Ronald started confiding in his friends about his desire to end the relationship and seek a younger companion.
In early 2011, Ronald Vinci found himself hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues, likely stemming from years of alcohol abuse. Although his doctors attributed the illness to his alcohol consumption, Vinci himself remarked that he had noticed a shift in the taste of his food recently. A friend jokingly suggested, "Maybe Catherine tried to poison you?" Ronald dismissed the jest without giving it much thought. In reality, Ronald had neglected his health. His excessive alcohol intake and the habit of consuming a multitude of pills in hopes of achieving relaxation and better sleep were taking a toll on his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald Vinci made a significant purchase, acquiring a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale. This property held a value of $3 million and was conveniently situated just steps away from where his yacht was docked. At the age of 70, Ronald was looking forward to spending the rest of his life in this comfortable residence. He looked forward to visits from his only son, Kerry, and his grandson. Kerry's occupation as a waiter was a subject of jest for Ron, who humorously claimed that Kerry was eagerly anticipating his father's passing. On the afternoon of June 28, 2011, the gardener of Ronald Vinci made a distressing call to 911, reporting an incident involving his employer. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of the millionaire in a guest bedroom. Shockingly, his body had been meticulously wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag. This bag also contained soiled sheets, and on top of it was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. Further examination revealed a slashed mattress beneath the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that, according to Catherine Pileggi, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently passed away. However, the officers harbored deep suspicions that his death was far from accidental. During the police interrogation, the gardener provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the discovery of Ronald Vinci's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine Pileggi had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence at Vinci's residence. Upon his arrival in the morning, he was confronted with the gruesome sight of the millionaire's lifeless body, wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in one of the guest bedrooms. Catherine, in a state of distress, tearfully implored the gardener to assist her in burying Ron. She revealed that Vinci had expressed a lifelong wish to be laid to rest in the ocean after his demise. To carry out this macabre plan, she had purchased a blue container intended to hold Vinci's body, with the intention of taking it out to sea using the millionaire's yacht. Catherine had already brought the container home and placed it in the garage by the time the gardener had alerted the authorities. Upon conducting a thorough examination, the medical examiner made gruesome findings. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, had sustained 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, bore marks consistent with hammer blows on his head, and had ultimately met his demise from a gunshot wound to the head. On the evening of June 27th, Ronald Vinci's friends visited his house. Catherine prepared the meal, and Ron provided drinks. During the gathering, Ron mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. During dinner, Ron complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Surprisingly, Ron, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m. His friends found this early bedtime unusual and eventually left his house. Catherine Pileggi, aged 54, was brought in for questioning a few hours later, where she provided a detailed confession. She recounted that around 1 a.m. on June 28th, a drunk Ronald Vinci woke up and began verbally insulting her. The situation escalated, and at some point, he chased her down the stairs, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed that she helped him up and guided him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Afterward, she went to clean the bloodstains on the stairs. A few hours later, she entered the guest bedroom to check on Ron, finding him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing that Vinci intended to kill her, Catherine acted out of fear and desperation, grabbing the gun and fatally shooting him in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine admitted, "I was very scared. I was angrier than I had ever been before. I felt like my soul had left my body." Following the shooting, she proceeded to inflict numerous additional wounds on Ron using a knife and a hammer. Catherine then wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to conceal the evidence. She called the gardener, realizing she couldn't dispose of the body alone. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder, which she intended to use to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. Furthermore, a gun matching the one used to shoot the millionaire was discovered in Catherine's car with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained a knife, cut up pieces of the mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine Pileggi faced a charge of first-degree murder and was subsequently arrested and detained. It came to light that just a month before the murder, in May, Catherine had been involved in a legal matter. Her sister had filed a complaint, accusing Catherine of borrowing money and then refusing to repay it. Catherine defended herself by claiming that the money was a gift
and thus refused to return it to her sister. On May 17th, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from the Vinci house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness spotted a white car with a large trailer near Vinci's home in the early morning, which belonged to the gardener. Vinci's friends revealed that he had been wanting to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had not been intimate for months and even slept in separate rooms within their large house. Just weeks before the tragedy, Ronald had attempted to give Catherine $1 million through one of his workers, asking her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's primary motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense argued that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and had acted in self-defense. Nevertheless, questions arose regarding why she didn't immediately contact the police, why she didn't tell the truth immediately, and why she endured the alleged abuse for years without leaving him. While some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a court psychiatrist identified some signs of domestic violence, none of Ronald's close associates could confirm witnessing any mistreatment in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and noted that she never complained about her life. During the court proceedings, Catherine made a startling accusation against Ronald Vinci, claiming that he was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister, Angela, 3 years prior, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela had embarked on a cruise in the Caribbean Sea. Angela had been struggling with substance abuse issues, and during a party on the cruise, she had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In her efforts to help her sister, Catherine performed artificial respiration, but tragically, Angela's heart stopped, resulting in her death. It later came to light that Ronald had provided Angela with some pills on the evening of the cruise, presumably to help her relax. Catherine firmly believed that these pills were a contributing factor in her younger sister's death. In 2014, a jury delivered a verdict, finding Catherine Pileggi guilty of the murder of Ronald Vinci. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Currently, Catherine is serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Marion County, Florida. Her potential release date is set for January 2034, by which time she will be 77 years old. The story of successful and wealthy Ronald Vinci took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with the quiet and unassuming flight attendant. Despite his many wise decisions in life, this particular relationship ultimately proved to be a fatal error in the life of the millionaire.